Mhm. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ladies of the PGS. I am your host, Artem, and of course, we have Lorena Creole with us tonight. Lorena, how are you doing?
I am doing great. It's as always, it is great to be here. So thank you so much for having me, and thanks so much to all of you for being here supporting the show. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Lorena. We love having you here. And there is so much to talk about, Lorena, so many developments. And of course, I cannot start the show out without thanking everybody who is here tonight, but also the fact that there is just news that we cannot ignore. And honestly, it's the Disney Chronicles. It's the Disney Chronicles of their CEOs that seem to like to play musical chairs or one person is here, then they're not. Lorena, I would not want to be the poor person who has to write up all these contracts over and over again and refill in names and remove names and figure out what's going on, Lorena, because this would drive me crazy. And of course, everybody out there, we are talking about the shocker. There's no other way to say it. It is just a surprise. It's a surprise, I guess, because I didn't see this coming. Did you, Lorena? Did you see this coming?
I didn't see it coming right away. And it's something that some people had heard rumblings about. It's, very common knowledge that Bob Chapek has irritated a lot of people in Hollywood with how he has been running Disney. Now, full disclosure, for those of you who don't know me, yes, I am a Disney stockholder. I've been a Disney stockholder for it's been a long time, probably since right before Marvel bought Disney. So I do own stock. I'm one of those little people that has, my couple shares of stock. But what you're seeing right now is what I call the C-suite games. When you work in corporate America and you have to deal with people in the C-suite, stuff like this happens. People get on the wrong side of someone else. The earnings are in the toilet. They're looking for somebody to blame for that. And Bob Iger, remember 2020, he stepped away and was like, "Okay, I'm out. I'm leaving. Here's Chapek. We'll drop him. We'll drop him into there." And he was basically set up to fail. There's no other way around it. He just was. So, am I surprised he's back? I'm surprised he's back so quickly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you make a good point about the entire thought, even the notion of listening to reports about the stock changing so dramatically. Like I could understand a few points, but a drop in it, a drop in the values of the stocks. I think that that would immediately send up red flags to a lot of people. Especially if, as you mentioned, you are a stockholder, but also just overall in confidence in the company as well. And there was nothing worse, Lorena, to hear these articles. And I think we saw an article recently where he was saying that there were going to be possible layoffs, Lorena, right before Christmas. This is your announcement. This is heartbreaking. This is devastating. And I don't think we've seen, anything like that since the pandemic started. And we unfortunately saw people in that unfortunate situation. But when we see articles like that, even with all the changes, you have to wonder about it. And it's not a good feeling, going forward. When you think about Disney, I mean, we want this company to do well. So many of us enjoy pretty much what they have. And while it's not perfect, I admit that not everything they do is not perfect. I'm still a fan of Disney. I'm not going to lie. I still buy Disney products. I'm going to go there many times over my lifetime. And that's just how it is. I enjoy it. And I'm not, I'm fine with that. I subscribe to Disney Plus. All these things bring me joy, and I'm going to continue my subscriptions to them. So that's how I feel about it. And I'm always going to feel that way. You and I were talking the other day, Lorena, and I said that every time I go to the park, I absolutely have to see Alice. these are things that I have to do. Like, I don't feel right going to that
Mhm.
park and not seeing Alice in Wonderland. And there's a reason, because it really does. It's something that I enjoy and something I love. So when you hear stories about cutbacks, especially in the parks, Lorena, of cast members,
Yes.
those are things that I really don't want to hear. It is a little different. I'm not saying that walking away from a film or something like that isn't also impactful, but for me, it feels like you're tearing out the heart of Disney when they're talking about layoffs, and we're not talking about one or two, right? It wasn't an article about one or two layoffs. It was more than that. And while we do understand there has to be changes periodically, this one just really seemed to hurt. What did you think about that article when you heard it? Let's say, it was a few weeks ago, right?
Yes, it was a few weeks ago. Um, it was not a smart move. He honestly should have kept his mouth shut about layoffs. And this is why. During the pandemic in 2020, you saw videos of all these cast members, still trying to support each other, help each other through the pandemic, keep people entertained. And what did they get in return for that? 30,000 of them laid off by email. By email. Now, I'm just a lowly stockholder, and I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
So, this close to Christmas, instead of saying, well, we're pretty much going to have to reevaluate how we do things due to financial challenges that are coming down the pike, he should cut it off like that. But because he's more of a money guy and he's not an emotional person, because, like I said, the C suite is full of emotion, he went and said that, and that was the end of it. That was probably one of the most tone deaf things to say this close to Christmas, especially given how many and how they laid off those cast members during the pandemic. Now, the stock is already, was already, I think, cut like probably like 50% of its value. It's crazy. Just to give you point of reference, I bought in Disney at $35 a share.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm fine. But at one time, it was headed close to $200 dollars a share. But like I said, it was tone deaf between, the bad earnings. The last earnings call was a dumpster fire. You see that meme where the dog is in the room that says, "This is fine," and there's fire all around? Well, Bob Chapek was that dog saying pretty much, "This is fine," and it's not fine.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been fine at all. So something had to be done. It's to the point where it could not be ignored anymore. And we won't get into Chapek not keeping his mouth shut and deciding to insert himself into Florida politics when he should have just stayed out of it and stayed with the original statement of like, look, we're trying to make entertainment for everybody, and that's what we want to focus on. Perfect. But he didn't do that.
Yeah, and that was a little strange as well. I think many people were surprised that he wasn't more tight-lipped, which normally executives are quite tight-lipped. You're lucky to get anything out of them other than a prepared statement that they didn't write nor did they read. So when they get up on the podium and recite this stuff, it sounds very kind of like it's not from them, because it isn't. And that's okay,
No.
because their main concern is just to, run the company properly, and their personal feelings may not necessarily be the most important thing or the best thing for the company. So what's coming out of their mouths are very clear, prepared statements that are meant to bolster the company. It's meant to, have success for the company. Nobody wants to see this company do poorly. Nobody wants any of that. And we certainly don't want cast members or anybody else losing their positions. Even, in the unfortunate circumstance with Twitter, those guys knew months in advance that there was some problem and they were getting severance pay and stuff. These guys didn't get anything like that in the first round. They were just kind of let go. And, it's certainly not that kind of treatment. And I'm not saying that it's fair in either case, but that was a blow to even hear that. And I thought to myself, right before the holidays, this is the message. That's
right. Exactly, right before the holidays, and said on an investor call, not said internally. You see the difference between the two. When you're saying something like that internally, at least it's internal within the company. He said that publicly to investors, and that affected the stock price. So that's why I'm saying that that's a difference between the two. I know there's some people who are glad that Bob Iger is back. As far as I'm concerned, I really don't have any faith, really, in Bob Iger, considering all the stuff that went to hell in a handbasket under his watch. So I understand why they brought him back, because it's like, look, who else are we going to bring back that we know that can do the job? Okay, we're going to bring Iger. Okay, that's fine. But remember, this is the guy under which we got the sequel trilogy. This is the guy that Galaxy's Edge was set up to fail. This is the guy who, on the Chinese movie posters for Black Panther and for, I believe it was
The Jedi, the Star Wars films.
yeah, Rise of Palpatine. I keep calling
Boyega.
it that.
Mhm.
John Boyega, nowhere to be seen.
Mhm.
Chadwick Boseman covered up. Why? Because China wanted that, and Iger went along with that. I remember that, and I wasn't too pleased with that either. So we will see what happens with Iger, but they've pretty much bought back the guy who wasn't really running stuff so great when he started. But in comparison, you have the CEO that Hollywood loves, who's a creative and understands how they think, which is Iger, and then you have Chapek, who's basically a money heads down straight shooter and doesn't quite read the room when, when he says things. So that's what you got going on right now. So it's the honeymoon period. Everybody's so great. It's like your ex-boyfriend that came back, you know, and you really did like him, even though he was a jackass, and he's back and you're kind of happy. And then it takes a couple of days before you realize why he was your ex in the first place. I think that's what we're going to have wind up happening here.
Well, it doesn't, even though we saw, not in this article, but in another article they mentioned, or maybe they do mention in this article, that the stock prices, this caused sort of a rebound, the reinvigoration in confidence and in stock prices reportedly. I did not check them or confirm that myself, but from what I've been seeing in the articles, it did, and there was sort of a surge in the value. So if that's correct, that's great.
Briefly.
But my question
Briefly.
is, and of course, I'm sure you're wondering this too, Lorena, are those people going to lose their jobs? And what effect is it overall going to have on projects going forward, Lorena? This is a big deal. He's made so many changes, more changes than our heads were spinning by what we were hearing over the last, what is it, since June? Our heads have been spinning by the changes. So does everything just go away? Like, how does anybody even deal with this? And I meant it as a joke with the lady who has to go ahead, or the man who has to go ahead and change all those names from one Bob to another.
Yeah, which Bob is?
Which one are
What
we
about right? What about the Bobs? No, you ask a very good question. That's kind of what everyone's asking. My primary question that I thought of was, are those layoffs actually going to happen?
Yes.
You know, did they already make a decision about what their reduction in force was going to be, or was Bob Chapek just floating it out there in the ether? I just think that's really irresponsible to float out there when you do not have a plan and you don't announce that internally before you announce it externally. So we really don't know. And I can't recall exactly where I read this morning, but supposedly Iger asked several creatives to bring like several pages of their best work, I guess, so he could get an idea of what was going on out there. So we will see what happens with this. It's a very interesting saga. I did not have this on my bingo card happening so fast.
Yeah, it is a surprise. And I do want to thank Punk Tracy. Thank you so much for the 99-cent super chat. We so appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the show and the channel and us. We so appreciate it. It's so kind of you to do that. It makes all the difference. Thank you so much. But Lorena, I have to wonder about what people are thinking in general in regards to the confidence of leadership at Disney. I think, going ahead and making a change after a few years. Usually it could be a 3-year contract. Seems reasonable, 100% reasonable. But
Mm-hmm.
this one seems very abrupt. It feels very unplanned, unexpected. I think we can all kind of agree that this was not in the cards. This was not the plan. I think they thought they were going to stay with Chapek for a good long time. And I think that this reversal of leadership is not only surprising but also confusing to many. And I think people maybe won't even know what direction they're going in now. Goodness gracious, how could you even predict anything at this point? The ink isn't even dry on the paper.
No, no, it's not. And just to remind people, Chapek had his contract renewed a few months ago.
Mhm.
Renewed a few months ago. So I would be really interested in what kind of wording, where if they were going to terminate your contract early, what the stipulation was for that, because if wasn't one in there.
There's definitely one. He's definitely going to get millions of severance for this. He's not walking away empty-handed. It's probably a substantial amount. I mean, some of them were getting bonuses of $23 million a year. I remember that in 2020, there was an executive who got $20 million or $23 million. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently the exact amount of money that it would cost to pay everybody who got laid off for the whole year or so. So that was kind of pointed out, and someone did some mathematics and said, yeah, that could have paid for everybody's salaries for the whole year. But to be honest with you, Lorena, we know that he is going out with cash. This is,
Oh yeah.
he's going to be fine. I think that this is going to be such a bumpy road. And I don't even know. I feel like I almost want to look away from this, but we almost can't look away from this because it's such a huge company that affects so much of entertainment.
Absolutely. It's a company that has its hands in so many parts of entertainment, from sports to children's programming, even all the way down to local television stations, because Disney owns, I think, like, they own the ABC local broadcasters, I think, in the top 5 American cities. So you're right. It's like, this isn't something that we can really look away from, just because of how big Disney is. So I'm guessing in a couple of years or whenever, when Chapek writes his memoirs, of course, they probably did make him sign an NDA to keep his mouth shut, along with the payout, that he got. It'll be interesting to find out his point of view from about all of this happening. So yeah, it's Disney is going to be very, very interesting to watch over the next let's put it this way, over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, he may not be the only one on the way out, Lorena, as you mentioned earlier today.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. One of Chapek's lieutenants. I know I say that in the British in
Yeah.
the British sense, but Kareem Daniel, who is actually, I believe he's involved in the digital side of things and one of Chapek's appointees, he got the boot.
Right. You did mention that earlier today, and it's just, I have a feeling we're going to keep seeing. It's unfortunate that this is happening. It's another shakeup, and it feels, oh goodness, I just feel for these people at this point where I'm sure they thought that this was kind of a done deal, and there was almost an easement, there was almost a détente in all of this
Mm-hmm.
for a little while, and for things to be in this way right now, it does feel very strange. I can't imagine what it must feel like for some of these employees who are probably very uncertain about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, for lower level employees, probably not as much. But when it comes to C-suite games, as I like to call them, these are the ones who they usually kick out the door. The one that they want gone, and the ones that have loyalty that are further up. to go along with them. And Kareem Daniel is definitely one of those. Another one, and actually, I have to give props to Valiant, Renegade, and WDW Pro. They were like, basically, keep an eye out on Kareem Daniel and anyone else
Mhm.
who Bob Chapek has, basically blessed or is connected to him. Because behind Kareem Daniel, you have Josh Damaro, who is the head of Parks Experiences. So he may be the third the third one to go. But even so, when you have this much of a shift in leadership in the C-suite, it does cause a lot of contention and anxiety to people further down in the ranks. Now, granted, it's not going to be as bad as, like, say, if there was somebody fresh off the plane who took over as CEO. Iger is someone that the company is familiar with, but still, it makes you wonder. There's going to be some very, very changing times going on. So eventually, or we may never find out exactly why Chapek was fired, for lack of a better term. We may never find out, but really, his reasons for being fired are really neither here nor there. The thing is, what is going to happen with Disney going forward? And like you brought up, what's going to happen with the projects going forward? What's going to happen with the films going forward? What's going to happen with the parks
Mhm.
going forward? And the parks are not exactly in the best spot. And what's going to happen, with ESPN and all of that other stuff? What is going to happen with that? So interesting
It
couple
is.
of weeks ahead.
It is going to be interesting. And, on a side note, they just brought in, they said they were going to do it in November, which they did. They brought in to the parks, The Mandalorian and Grogu. Lorraine,
In
you and I
Disneyland.
had
Yeah.
talked about this. And, when things like that happen and then there's a change of leadership, I wonder whether that's going to stick around, because, you just never know about some of these things. It was something that was announced fairly, I guess it was in May that it was announced that that was happening, but
Hmm.
and it might have already been in process before before Chapek came along. But the point is that things can change like this, and sometimes it can have a domino effect, where they kind of want to start from scratch or do different things. And that's why it's a little unsettling for me, because he's got to be there by the time I get there again, Lorena. It's got to be
I
there.
don't. He's not going to go anywhere, and I'm going to tell you why. The Mandalorian and that little baby Grogu are a gold mine to Disney. They will not be going anywhere. Anywhere. So they will definitely be there for you.
All right. Well, as I said, we all enjoy going to the parks, those of us who do go to the parks, and we enjoy the entertainment that comes out of this company tremendously. So it is something we have to watch. Lorena, I don't even want to think about what's going to happen tomorrow with these guys, because we're just going to get news reports where everything is
Hmm.
just going to be, I
Hmm.
don't know. It's going to be, well, this is happening and this thing is stopped and they don't know. And it felt like for a while we had some stability. Was it a false sense of stability? Was it a false sense of
No, I think it was an act in a play that we were meant to see. Um, Iger saw what was going on with the pandemic. I mean, the parks were losing money. They had to shut down Shanghai Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland. Those are two darlings of Iger's, and he saw the writing on the wall, and he's just like, well, okay, I'm going here. You handle this. You handle this so you can take the fall for it. And I cannot tell you how many times in corporate America where I've seen where there's some risky project, they put someone else on there and they're just like, because if that goes down the tubes, guess what? That's who we can blame, and that's who we can get rid of. And the chick who was the head of getting Galaxy's Edge started and got panned for it, Chapek set her up and she got fired.
Oh my goodness. Well, Lorena, we need some kind of an uplifting story. I know
Absolutely,
just a
absolutely.
little bit of uplifting here, and I couldn't help but stay away from this incredible series that stars Chris
Hmm.
Hemsworth, and I managed to get I believe it's the same banner that they used to advertise it. I believe that this is the picture that both you and I saw of Hemsworth advertising this series that he's in that he made with National Geographic called Limitless. Lorena,
Yes.
I don't know how you felt when you first saw this picture, but when I saw this, I immediately knew that I had to watch this series. Have you seen this advertisement, and what did you think when you first saw it?
Well, actually, I saw the advertisement in two places. Interesting, after we talked about it and you told me about this, I happened to turn on Fire TV and boom, guess who popped up? Chris Hemsworth in this absolutely gorgeous, frozen but not frozen picture. I'm like, okay, click, put that on my list. Second thing, when I was at Disney's Hollywood Studios, they have these billboards in the parking lot advertising Disney shows, kind of what they do. They had the same one out there on the way into the parks, and I just had to stop and look at it because it was just freaking gorgeous. It's a hot. Chris Hemsworth is a good looking man. Shoot, I don't care who you are. He's a good looking man. He looks athletic
Yes.
and just simple, limitless with Chris Hemsworth. It's just like
Yeah.
I got to find out what the show is about.
Yeah, I mean, this picture alone draws you in, and it's just his natural, charismatic nature. It has fantastic physical condition, some of the best physical condition in Hollywood now, for
Hmm.
sure. Um,
Absolutely.
and maybe even just that whole family has it, but he certainly does have a lot of charisma and charm. He's very interesting. He certainly commands a lot of presence in this photo, and as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not going to necessarily knock his let's say his previous film, but this one he feels so much more in control. He feels powerful, strong, very masculine. You can
Hmm.
see the energy, you can see the power behind him and the intensity in his face in this picture. The marketing alone for this one photograph, Lorena, I mean, it's worth $1 million, isn't it?
Absolutely. Whoever took this photo is top notch in their craft. I mean, you look at it and you're just like, this is so slick. I have to go. And I have to go and watch this show. And I'm so glad that I did. Like you were saying, it's a very masculine show. You've got, Chris Hemsworth basically pushing himself to be his best self because that's what he wants to be. Whatever challenge, sometimes he succeeds at them, sometimes he fails at them, but it's laid out there for us all to see. So it's great. It's a breath of fresh air to actually see a masculine looking man doing masculine stuff with his friends who give him crap as they should at every turn, but yet are just like, dude, keep doing that. I mean, just how encouraging they are. So it is definitely worth watching. And if you like National Geographic, the visuals are insanely gorgeous.
Yes, yes, they are. And I have to admit, I've watched a few of the episodes actually with you, Lorena,
Hmm.
and we've been enjoying them. What I wanted to say is that it really is an interesting show because he's not by himself. He brings
No,
along his family and friends, and I think that that's so important. I think it shows the importance of having family and friends around you as a star, as someone, these jobs that they do, it's kind of demanding time wise, where they'll be might be on a set for hours and hours and hours, and you kind of need a support team around you doing all that work. And they showed you him with his children a little bit, and I think it's very interesting because here are some of the shots, Lorena, that they have for the show. There he is. And there's one of the other shots. I guess they were testing his flow rate, his oxygen
hmm
rate.
Yeah.
it. There's a kind of a swimming challenge. It was actually more than a swimming challenge, guys. This show actually involves scientific research. There are legitimate medical doctors who do research in wellness. And what
Hmm.
happens is Chris Hemsworth, who is incredibly young at 39, almost questions his mortality in this show, Lorena, in a way that I'm surprised. Is there pressure on younger people? Let's say someone in your 30s is young. That's young. Are
Hmm.
they feeling pressure about mortality these days, Lorena?
I think it depends on, I would say, where you are in life. If you are, and I'm generalizing, I'm going to say this right here. If you are a 39-year-old single man, you're just like, I'm just out here doing what it is that I want to do. And you're not necessarily always thinking about your mortality. Chris Hemsworth is a father of 3 children. So he's kind of forced to think, and he said this in the show. He's like, I want to be around for my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. So thinking of that makes him think about his mortality, and he's probably thinking about it a lot more than, like, say, someone his age who is single, or someone his age who is married or partnered and they do not have children. I think it's and again, I'm generalizing. I think it's because of his particular situation with him and his kids, and how devoted he is to his children, and that he wants to be around for them, that he wants to take it seriously about handling stress. And so he is thinking about his mortality, which is interesting considering some of the challenges that they they put him in with these first 2 episodes. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Well, it is very interesting because they are their temperature. We see temperature extremes. We see, but you know what was interesting too, Lorena? And there was that one episode where there's that swimming challenge.
Hmm.
And when I first saw where they did, where they kind of like he was in a sort of more of a compromised position where his hands were bound and his
Hmm.
feet were bound, and I thought to myself, what are they doing? They're going to kill you. Are you trying to kill this man? And of course, that's not what the exercise was about. Like, it had nothing to do with them trying to hurt this man. It was the fact that I didn't know that you could swim being, in that type of a position, or being, tied up like that. I just didn't think it was possible. And so honestly, I'm seeing things that are somewhat extraordinary and unexpected in this series. What about you, Lorena? What did you think about that?
I thought that was very interesting to watch. The people who I guess were watching over him while he did that, they were part of special forces in Australia. So obviously they need survival training. What happens if you're kidnapped and you're bound and they throw you into the water? How are you going to survive? You need to know how to do that and what to do, how to swim if you're bound. It's a difference between life or death. So seeing him put in that situation, one, gave me yet much more respect for the armed forces and the survival techniques that they're taught. But at the same time, putting him in a position that he was not used to being in. Like he said in the show, I know these guys aren't going to let me die, but I'm very uncomfortable about having to do this. And I'm not going to spoil it for you guys. You have to watch the episode.
Right, right.
But Chris is not like, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is going to be fine. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to show these special forces people how it's done. No, Chris Hemsworth was like, this might not go too well for me. I'm really afraid of failing at this exercise.
And well, the other thing that I was going to say is that, and I know that I am kind of like, I praise men, and it's no secret, Lorena. We love you guys out there. But I was impressed with what these men can do. And
Hmm.
certainly, I'm always impressed in seeing what men can do. So that was also kind of a very pleasurable thing to see him being able to do these things. I didn't know
Hmm.
that was possible. So it was also kind of like, somewhat fascinating for me to see, and realizing, what limits men can be pushed to and can still perform amazing feats. You don't have to be a superhero to even do any of this stuff.
Absolutely. Because speaking of superheroes, and I guess I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Oh,
I'm
you did
going to
not.
get to it. Speaking of superheroes, another really great part of this series
Mhm.
is how they will just bring in ordinary people who do extraordinary things, people who have overcome fear. They even bring in people who are like firefighters to kind of bring Chris along and show, like, how you have to stay calm under some insane circumstances, and just having more respect for what it is that firefighters do, and just ordinary people who are interested in pushing their limits. So you just get ordinary people's stories dropped into this along with Chris Hemsworth's journey. So it's not just him, although he's kind of spearheading it. You get to find out things about just regular people pushing their own limits. So I thought that was a really, really good thing to add.
Yes, I was trying to look for a picture where it showed that, and I couldn't find one. But you're absolutely right, Lorena. This is a show that certainly uh, does exactly what you said about ordinary people's experiences. And then some of the stuff that you learn about in the show, you can apply to your own life. And I think that idea of wellness is something we all can share, and
Mhm.
try and practice. Like I every day I try and practice wellness. Sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't, but I try to practice as much wellness as I can. Now, on a
Mhm.
serious note,
Mhm.
um, Hemsworth kind of there was an article about him. I don't even know how to say this without getting somewhat emotional about it, but I kind of understand a little bit, because my mother has cognitive impairment. Maybe that's too much information, but he talks about how he wants to more or less take a break from acting
Hmm.
because of an Alzheimer's risk. Now, I don't know whether it's to him or to a loved one. I haven't actually read this article in its entirety. It came out a little while ago.
Mhm.
Um, and he says he wanted to go public to increase understanding and awareness of the disease. And Lorena, when I was watching this program with you, he kept talking about, or they kept talking about, ways to decrease the occurrence of Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And I thought this was very interesting. And I didn't. There were some things that he was trying to address about it, and it turns out that he's learned that he has a heightened risk of developing Alzheimer's. So
Mhm.
um, he went under these tests as part of doing the documentary, Lorena. And he told Vanity Fair the test confirmed his biggest fear, adding he will now try to take preventative steps. And of course, Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia that causes memory loss and functions. He has a specific gene.
Mhm.
And he says, it's not like I've been handed my resignation, Hemsworth said, but added the news really triggered something in me to want to take some time off. If you look at Alzheimer's prevention, the benefit of preventative steps is that it affects the rest of your life. It's about sleep management, stress management,
Mhm.
nutrition, movement, and fitness. It's all the kind of the same tools that need to be applied in a consistent way. So this Limitless series, here it's I don't know, maybe it was revealed during the series. He does go ahead and test his body to these limits in hopes of, I guess, maybe addressing that to live longer and healthier. So
Mhm.
he says, he explains that had he not been diagnosed with this, but had been warned of a heightened risk. That's what he's saying. He's not been diagnosed, but he has a heightened risk. It's not a predeterministic gene, but it's a strong indication. He says 10 years ago, I think it was more of a thought as a determinant. So, I did kind of just
Hmm.
mention this because he said the original plan would have seen him receive all his genetic tests live to the camera. But series creator Darren Aronofsky told him privately
Mhm.
once they got the results. And so he was given the option of removing any references to Alzheimer's from the show. but decided to include his genetic risk of it to improve awareness and understanding. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lorena, this is extraordinary that he's doing this, pretty much for anyone who is affected by this. Anyone who is not affected by this show is remarkable for the wellness and the awareness of your life. But Lorena, I have to give this man so much credit for this. Certainly something to think about, him even caring about the wellness of others and to see how this will benefit people going forward. What are your thoughts on this? And please ignore the jewelry, guys. I don't have a ring like that.
I'm looking. I'm like, I think I want that right there. Blingy things get my attention. Um, I will have to say I am very glad that Chris Hemsworth revealed that he does have a risk factor for Alzheimer's, and here's the reason why. A close family friend of mine, he was probably, I say was because unfortunately he did pass away from complications from Alzheimer's. Brilliant man, I mean absolutely brilliant, and it was so difficult to see him slowly decline with Alzheimer's. I mean, he went from the vibrant, sharp theologian that I knew and that I was so proud of, still proud of him at the time, just the cognitive decline. And he fought that as hard as possible as soon as he got the diagnosis. And one of his doctors had actually said that if he hadn't been so brilliant in the first place, Alzheimer's would have set in much quicker than it did. So it was actually slowed down in him because of him, because he was so studious and all of that. So I'm very glad that Chris Hemsworth made that known, because it's like if somebody like Chris Hemsworth is susceptible to that, someone who's watching that is probably like, well, I know somebody with Alzheimer's, or I've been diagnosed with the risk, for contracting Alzheimer's. People who have family members who have it or unfortunately have passed away due to complications with that. It gives a very emotional connection. So I'm very, very glad that that he revealed that, because if anything, it makes those people who have been touched by Alzheimer's disease even more interested in this series. So I'm very, very glad that he did that, and also gives more awareness to Alzheimer's.
Certainly. It really does. And it is something for all of us to think about. And I think that it's a step in the right direction. Here he is doing this show, which already had some extreme moments in it. I think that this certainly shows that he has a sense of community, and for everyone pretty much on the earth and around him, that somebody could benefit from this show, and the
Mm-hmm.
idea of being inspired. Because I know that picture that we saw in the beginning, I'm so inspired wanting to see it, and then realizing the magnitude of what he's doing and what he's trying to do, and what National Geographic is also continually does, I guess, more or less. It really is something that's wonderful. So I have to give, Hemsworth and his family and National Geographic, the entire production team. This is really, it's on Disney. So I have to give them credit for doing something that just was really extraordinary, Lorena. I'm just so thrilled with it, guys. If you get a chance to watch Chris Hemsworth in Limitless is the name of the show. It's on Disney Plus. I believe it's 6 episodes. Lorena and I are doing a watch party for it, so you will see that as well. But I did just want to mention this, what Hemsworth is doing. It truly is remarkable. So please do check him out in that. And you also do get to see, for those of you who want to see it, he does show his athleticism. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yes, yes, he does. Thank you, National Geographic. That's all I'm
Yes.
saying.
Yes, thank you. We so appreciate it. And I promise you, for those of you out there who want to see that, you will appreciate it as well. So on to the next story, Lorena. Boy, the time is flying by tonight, isn't it? Woo!
It sure is.
Last article. Woo. Oh my goodness, I gotta get the fan on me again here. Okay, so I have some. I guess to kind of wrap up the show because we're actually running out of time. If I don't get this on here, um, has to do with Wakanda Forever. And guys, we actually, support this film. Just to be very clear, do I have this article up? No, I do not. That's why I can't find it. It has to do with Wakanda Forever, and I thought I had clipped it up there, guys. Let me just pull it up here. It has to do with what's going on with the film and something very interesting interview that we heard about it. And yeah, I'm failing here. So Wakanda Forever is still in the theater. It's still making money. And that's what we want to see. I want this film to succeed, and so do you, Lorraine, and so do all of us out there who are watching the film. And there were some things that we would have liked to have changed in the film. But we had also learned, and Lorraine and I were talking about this as well, that there was an actual first script that was written and completed. And unfortunately, they had to write another script, in response to losing Chadwick Boseman, which is the film that is Wakanda Forever in the theaters, guys. So when we learned about this other script, there were some very specific things that once I realized would have been in the original film, I really am at a loss for words about the fact that we were unable to get this. So the first thing that this script would have addressed, Lorena, is the fact that T'Challa had been gone for 5 years. He'd been gone for 5 years. And this is something that everyone was talking about in regards to the snap. What happened to come back? And we saw a little bit of it in WandaVision. We saw some of it in some of the Spider-Man films. But this was going to be the first film that was going to truly address how do you respond to your king when he's gone for 5 years. And I think that would have been such an interesting dynamic to see in the kingdom of Wakanda, because the women are so strong and powerful. And now to have T'Challa back, what would the response have been, do you think, for people to even see him again? Would have been quite a shock. What do you think, Lorena, about that notion of addressing the 5-year, absence after the snap when he comes back?
I think that would have been a great way to bring about this particular film. As a matter of fact, I have to give props to Fatal J, because he's the first person who said, yo, what if Wakanda Forever happens during the blip? I'm like, okay, I could rock with that, because what happens when your leader is gone? What do you do? What do you do when half your people are gone? It brings up a very, very interesting situation. So if that was the case, I'm like, okay, that actually would have been made for a much better movie, because the motivation is already in there. What happens when your leader is gone? And not just he disappeared, like he walked out for, to go get ice cream and he never came back. It's like he got Thanos snapped away, along with half of the population of Earth.
Exactly. There was a lot to rectify after that had all happened. And, also it was going to deal with the loss of not being around your loved ones for that amount of time, not having the person around. Now, perhaps the most profound thing that was in that script, Lorena, that's still like, I get chills when I think about this, is that T'Challa was going to have to reconcile with being a father and meeting his child for the first time. So apparently, I guess he had never met his child, and now he was going to meet his child in this movie. And I think that would have been so profound. And of course, Lorena, you and I have talked about this extensively, about the importance of the film, the previous film, and the importance of Black fathers and their sons, and having those bonding moments as a result of not just that film, but of T'Challa's relationship with his father throughout the entire, phase. What do you think about how that would have been for T'Challa to meet his son in the film if that had come to fruition?
I think that would have been extremely powerful. And for me, it would have been a callback to in Black Panther. You saw what happened when Killmonger took the herb and he saw his father. I mean, his father who he didn't really have around. That scene was heartbreaking. And thinking about what would happen with T'Challa meeting his son, because there is something that happens to a man in a good way when he finds out that he has children, and especially when he finds out that he has a son. That's something we've seen in The Lion King. That's something we've seen throughout several other films, just that central story of what have I passed down to my son. That would have been so powerful to see. And yet another powerful story of Black men as fathers. In Black Panther, you had kind of like the father to son. And if it would have been in this case, it would have been to the next generation passed down. How powerful would that have been? And not only just powerful, but just how universal that would have been. And to me, again, it's another missed opportunity. It's a shame.
It is a shame. I think it would have been very profound to see that beautiful moment. Of course, we did see a beautiful moment in Wakanda Forever, but to see that as well would have just been icing on the cake. And the other thing, the final thing that I think, well, it's actually two things. The
Hmm.
first thing is the idea of Black love. And of course, this would have had to have come up because we already know that T'Challa has a relationship and that there are two people who love
Right.
the mother of his child, and now there's this family
Hmm.
together. I think that this would have been quite wonderful to see this young, a young family together in this type of thing, but also to see, essentially Black love. That's what it is. Um,
Right.
and it's not something that we always get to see, especially in this universe. I think that would have been so amazing to see a relationship. And I know I had kind of said before that I would have liked to have seen Shuri at least have this romantic interlude with Namor because it felt like that's where they were heading towards. But if
Hmm.
they had come out with that version of a film, it would have been quite different, and certainly, I think maybe expected in some ways, especially since we know that there is this beautiful child here. At least that way, the child would have been out in the open. Lorena, I feel like they were hiding this child. It's such an odd situation in the film. um Maybe if they had done the first version, we would have seen the child and it would have been just a different type of reception rather than him sort of being hidden away. It feels like he was hidden away. And I can't help but feel weird about that because he's so amazing. He would have uplifted the whole nation, Lorena.
That's kind of how I felt. It felt like it was an afterthought. And I didn't feel that that was handled well at all. I feel that this film should have ended when you saw Shuri finally burning her funeral clothes. I thought that that was the most powerful way to end that. I loved that scene. But they add in his son like an afterthought, and it, to me, it felt ham-fisted. It felt as ham-fisted as in that last episode of She-Hulk where you meet Hulk's son. It's kind of like, oh yeah, here I am, and here's my son. I'm just like, that's not how you do that.
Yeah, it wasn't how you do it. We all know that that was kind of weird, that he was kind of thrown in there at the last minute. After all, it was a post-credit scene that you introduce a king or the heir to
Yeah,
the throne.
you don't
Yeah,
do that.
that's not exactly the type of reverence we would expect from someone who's the heir to a kingdom. So certainly, I think that they didn't really think that one through. But it would have been such a great
No.
moment to have seen that. And unfortunately, we missed out on that opportunity. But it is something to think about going forward.
Hmm.
I'm not quite sure. Whether, I'm sure this script was fantastic. It probably had everything that a lot of us were looking for. And of course, everything that was in the current film was probably in it as well. So I think they took some elements of it, but, it was certainly a missed opportunity. And, it's something to think about. I think while we're thinking about it here, they did want to
Mhm.
give us those things, but for whatever reason, they were unable to. And I am kind of looking at it a little differently in that respect. I still would have liked for them to have found a different solution and still do what they
Mhm.
did in this film, which they could.
I Right, I agree, and I think, I believe both you and I brought that up when we did our review fresh out of the theater. Looking at what we got on screen, some of it that was just so disjointed made me wonder, what did the original script look like? Because for me, I felt that this movie was released much earlier than it needed to be, and there were so many things that if they would have just went back, polished the script up, it would have been perfect, but or as close to perfect as you can get. But knowing that there is that original script that seems to include all of those things that basically we were talking about, I hope one day to actually finally see that and see what Ryan Coogler's total vision was and what got discombobulated by producers and committees and all of that for the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be interesting to find out all of that stuff. I'm sure this was not easy to figure out. They certainly made him earn his money on this one. And I think that going forward, I think they will listen to people's concerns and they might address some things going forward. This had to have been very hard for all of them to deal with, but going forward, I think they can do better. Um, but it is almost time for the end of the show, Lorena. An hour already. I can't believe it. The time just flies by. Lorena,
Mhm.
where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter causing all kinds of mischief with my hot takes. You can find me, of course, on Instagram as well. And of course, you can find me on YouTube. And tomorrow, actually at 5 p.m. Eastern, I have a video premiering where I interview Orange Grove 55 and Dre. They run a Disney podcast. And actually going to be talking a little bit about the Bobs. Interestingly enough, we filmed this interview a couple of days before the news about Chapek being out and Iger being brought in. So definitely please do check out that video premiere tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. And of course, you can always find me streaming with her here on Ladies of the PGS over on her channel and also over on my channel. And thank you guys so much for being here and supporting the show. It means a whole lot.
Absolutely, guys. Like and subscribe to Lorraine Creole's channel and like and subscribe to Positive Fandom, guys. You can find me here on the PGS with Lorraine, also on her channel as well for our Toxic Male Appreciation Show on her Twitch channel on Thursdays at 5 p.m. You can also find me on my Sunday brunch show on Positive Fandom at 10:30 on Sundays. And you can also find me on the 1/6 Scale Man Network and Midnight's Edge as well, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We so appreciate it. For all of you out there, no matter where you are, always do remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.